Hey guys, Miss Rix here. Today we're going to start talking about blood. And blood is a really important part of our body because it's going to basically transfer everything throughout our body. It takes care of everything that our body needs to run. So it's the transport system to get all of these nutrients in and out of our body. So let's go ahead and get started. So a little bit of fun facts about the blood. It is the only fluid tissue in the human body. So it is a tissue and it is obviously fluid. It does have a distinct taste, odor, and it is 5 times thicker than water. So that old saying about blood and water is in fact true. Blood is thicker than water. It is classified as a connective tissue. So there's two main parts to blood. We have living cells, which are called the formed elements. So these are the solid parts of the blood, the formed elements. And we have non-living matrix, which is the plasma. This is the fluid part. This is like the taxi cab of the body system. So let's talk about some physical characteristics of this blood. We have some oxygen-rich blood and we have oxygen-poor blood. So oxygen-rich blood has received oxygen and it's carrying it out through the body to the different tissues and cells in the body. It is going to be a brighter red than oxygen-poor blood. And oxygen-poor blood is kind of taking carbon dioxide back outside of the body. And so this is going to be a duller red. So it's a myth that our blood is blue, but it is a different color than the oxygen-rich blood. Blood has to maintain a pH between 7.35 and 7.45. It is slightly alkaline, and sometimes we can taste that when if we ever taste blood or have blood in our mouth or anything like that, you can taste that alkaline consistency. Blood temperature is slightly higher than body temperature, and we have about 6 quarts in our body. Some people have a little bit more, men have a little bit more than women, but it's about 6 quarts. When we talked about it in class, everybody seemed to have gotten their blood drawn at least once in their life. So what's happening when they are drawing your blood? So basically they'll take blood from your vein and they'll put it in this tube, this test tube here. And then they're going to transfer it to a lab, and which is another good career choice if you're wanting to get in the medical field. You could be a lab technician, and they're going to analyze this blood. So first they're going to spin it within a centrifuge, and that's going to separate these different parts of the blood. So in general, we have about 55% of blood plasma. And then about 45% of these formed elements. So you can see there's a couple of parts to this formed element. We have this thin white line here, and then we have this red formed elements here. So these are the white blood cells comparative to the red blood cells. We have about 1,000 red blood cells per 1 white blood cell. So we have a lot of red blood cells, not as many white blood cells. And so by separating these, they can see how much of what is in the blood, and we can decide what's going on within our body by getting these blood samples. So this part right here with the white blood cells is actually called the Buffy zone, and that's just the white blood cell portion of the formed elements. So this can change. In general, we have about 55% plasma, but if you live at high elevations, you're going to actually have more, about 60% red blood cells in your blood. And that's because they're going to take in more oxygen because you're not going to get as much oxygen at higher elevations. So just a fun fact, you will have more red blood cells in your blood if you live at a higher elevation. We don't have that problem here in Texas. So let's talk a little bit about blood plasma. So blood plasma is composed of approximately 90% water, but it does include some other dissolved substances. So these dissolved substances are things like nutrients, salts, respiratory gases, as we learned in the respiratory system, oxygen, carbon dioxide, hormones are transferred through our blood, proteins, and waste products. These are all going to be in the blood plasma. We also have plasma proteins. These are going to be the proteins within the plasma, within the white part of our blood. So we have albumin, which regulates osmotic pressure. So it's going to regulate how much water is inside and outside. And we have clotting proteins that basically do what they say. They help clot the blood when it needs to fix tissue. And then we have antibodies that help protect the body from antigens. So our formed elements, which are on the bottom of the centrifuge, or on the bottom of the test tube, are erythrocytes. Erythrocytes are erythro meaning red. They're red blood cells. And then we have leukocytes, which are, leuko means white, which are white blood cells. And then we have platelets, which are these cell fragments. So these platelets are what we use to clot our blood. So let's look at the different types of cells that we have in our formed section of our blood. So we have the erythrocytes. This is basically a basic red blood cell. So this red blood cell is going to transport oxygen. It's going to bind the oxygen within the blood cell, and then it's going to also release carbon dioxide to the alveoli in order to excrete it from the body, because it is our waste product. And then we have a plethora of white blood cells. So we have two different kinds of white blood cells. We have these granulocytes, but we also have agranulocytes. So right now we're going to talk about the granulocytes, and that just means that there's visible granules within these cells. So, okay, so these granulocytes consist of three main types of white blood cells. So we have the neutrophils, and these are basically acts in phagocytosis. So basically they're going to find infections, and they're going to eat those infections within your blood, and actually outside of your blood, because white blood cells can go in and out of your blood. Then we have the eosinophils. Sorry. These eosinophils can kill parasites. They actually increase during an allergic reaction, and they can kill antibodies as well through phagocytosis. So then we have these basophils. These basophils contain histamine, which will kind of take away inflammation within the body. So those are the different kinds of granulocytes. Now we'll talk about the agranulocytes. And so you can see that these do not have visible granules within them. You can see the basophils has granules within them. The yeminocytes, sorry. So the first we have in the agranulocytes are these lymphocytes, and they are part of the immune system. They produce antibodies in order to protect the body from pathogens. They also fight tumors and viruses within the body. Then we have monocytes, and monocytes also perform phagocytosis, and they also kind of clean up or take out the toxins or the waste products within the body, as far as cleaning up after infection. So we also have these platelets, and obviously platelets are for clotting. So they initiate clotting by clinging to these areas where there's tears involved in the tissue, and so they can clot it and then wait for other things to come and fix that tear or that distress within the tissue. All right, so that is the main pieces of the blood, and in our next video we'll talk about the difference between erythrocytes, red blood cells, white blood cells, and these platelets.